on to the AFC South. So, they brought in defensive end Justin Houston. They brought in Clayton Gathers at safety and Pierre Desir at cornerback. And then Devin Funches at wide receiver. So I think with Frank Wright as the offensive coordinator, I really think the sky's the limit for that offense, especially if Andrew Luck is healthy, which unfortunately is not the case right now. He has what was at one point called a calf strain, and then owner Jim Irsay came out and called it a small little bone thing. Not really sure what that's supposed to mean. There really hasn't been much for clear reports. I believe GM Chris Ballard, yeah, some might say his luck has run out. Chris Ballard came out and said it was something that would affect a lot of his lateral movement. That being said, I know in pregame warmups for their second preseason game against the Browns, he was seen doing a lot of drills that tested his lateral movement. I'm of the opinion that he will be ready week 1. I think right now, if it was the regular season, he would be playing. I think they just want to make sure he's as he just you get over there, Seismic. I think they just want to make sure he's 100%. I know he missed, it was 2 years ago now, he missed the entire season with that shoulder injury. And that was one of those injuries that went from, yeah, we think he'll be ready to week 1 to he won't start the year on the pup. And then next thing you know, he was out the whole season. I think this is one of the best offensive lines that he's had. They made a lot of improvements last year. Quentin Nelson really headed that up. And then also they have added a lot of weapons besides T.Y. Hilton now. They add Devin Funches, real big-bodied wide receiver, help in the red zone. And then they drafted Paris Campbell, who is one of those guys that's really fast. He's known for just being able to take a slant route and take it to the house. I really think this is one of the better wide receiver cores Andrew Luck has had in his career. In addition to the wide receivers, they got Eric Ebron, who was scoring touchdowns at an insane rate last season. I think there will be some regression there. I don't think he can keep that up, but I think him and Devin Funches will probably dominate most of the red zone targets for the Colts offense. On defense, they're a young group. Darius Leonard, middle linebacker, they drafted last year, really burst onto the scene. Not many people seem to have heard of him. And then I believe he ended up leading the NFL in tackles. He was snubbed from a Pro Bowl, which was disappointing. They made some more additions this year. They brought in Rocky Sin, a cornerback, and they drafted a couple linebackers as well, Ben Bangu and Bobby Okereke. I think they'll be improved on defense. As long as Andrew Luck's healthy, the offense will be good. They do have a good backup in Jacoby Brissett, but obviously he's a step down from Andrew Luck. I think the Colts will have a pretty good year. I have them going 11-5. Unfortunately, though, I don't think that'll be enough to win the division, but I think it will be enough to get a wild card spot. I don't know why linebackers have unique names. I guess when you have a unique name, you just like to hit people because you probably got made fun of it at some point in your life. All right, now on to the Houston Texans. Cause for more power. Okay. So the Houston Texans, they have their franchise quarterback. They got a great pass rushing combo. And it really feels like this is a year where they need to make a deep playoff run. They've been good for a few years now. It just seems like they're always just missing something and come up short. Last year they lost they got beat up pretty good by the Colts in the playoffs last year. One of their big problems in the past has been health on the defensive line. J.J. Watt has had some injury history, not great injury history, but he seems to be healthy and good to go. He had a great year last year. Jadeveon Clowney is currently holding out. They franchise tagged him. He's yet to come in and sign his franchise tag. Now, all the reports I've heard is that he plans on signing the tag after the third preseason game. So it kind of sounds like he just didn't want to show up to training camp. He'll sign it after the third preseason game. He won't play in the fourth preseason game, but he should be ready week 1. They had some secondary issues last year. They didn't really make any moves in the draft or free agency to help that. They did draft a corner in the second round, Lonnie Johnson. I feel like maybe they're just hoping that their front seven will be good enough to where their secondary won't need to be. Now they have had some offensive line problems. Pro Football Focus has them ranked 31st headed into this season. And they did draft some offensive linemen. Drafted Titus Howard in the first round. And then they drafted Max Sharpingen, an offensive tackle, in the third round. Hey, Angel. Thanks for the follow. So, hopefully the offensive line improves. Now, one thing, they haven't really had a secondary pass-catching option besides DeAndre Hopkins. At least they could stay healthy. Will Fuller now, I think this will be year 3 for him, where every year he's had an injury. He's coming back from the ACL tear. All reports I've seen is he said he's going to be ready to go for week 1. Obviously, he's also said he wants to play 16 games. I think that's the goal for every NFL player. If he can stay on the field, in addition to Kiki Kuti, who he did suffer an ankle injury in the preseason, but their reports are that it isn't considered a major injury. Hopefully, it's not. That's going to be definitely the best trio of wide receivers that Deshaun Watson has had. Also, with making the trade for Duke Johnson, I think will help him out a lot. There's a lot of dinking and dunking that happened, especially in the playoff game against the Colts. And Lamar Jackson isn't the greatest pass catcher, their other running back. So I think that could help. Especially with a poor offensive line, you're going to probably have to dump it off more than you'd like. All that being said, I think the Texans are going to be a good... Okay, I'll explain that later. All that being said, I expect the Texans to be a really good team. I have them winning the division and going 12-4. All right. On to the Tennessee Titans. They traded for Ryan Tannehill from the Dolphins. They brought in Adam Humphries at wide receiver. Cameron Wake at defensive end. The only major departure, they had Josh Klein, an offensive guard, leave. But they did bring in Roger Saffold, a offensive guard, as well. They really found their identity last year in the second half of the season, where they ran the ball a lot all season, but it became a heavily focused run game with Derrick Henry. Early in the year, he did get a lot of carries, but Dion Lewis was heavily involved. still. I don't think he'll disappear all this season like he did at the end of last year. But I think they're gonna continue to run that ball a lot and try and play good defense. Their defense is decent. They do have a new offensive coordinator. Last year's offensive coordinator, Matt LaFleur, left to go be the head coach for the Packers. Their new offensive coordinator is Arthur Smith. He is a first-time OC. On offense, so their number one wide receiver has been Corey Davis. He's shown flashes of that he could be a real stud wide receiver, but it's only been flashes. He hasn't been able to do on a consistent basis. I think part of that, though, is because Marcus Mariota has been a very inconsistent quarterback as well. Not only with injuries, but just his play on the field has been real up and down. So bringing in Adam Humphries, I think, will really help them offensively. He's a slot guy, a lot of underneath routes. I think that could help Mariota a little bit. And Tannehill has looked good in the preseason. Who knows? Maybe we'll see a lot of Ryan Tannehill this year. They have a pretty good offensive line. That being said, their starting left tackle, Taylor Lewan, will be suspended for the first 4 games. I believe that was due to PEDs. One thing that I've found interesting, there seems to be a lot of PED suspensions this offseason. There's certain things, I think Ben Watson's suspension was part of a fertility thing he was going through. That I guess it was just more testosterone introduced to the body than naturally produced, which the NFL sees as a performance enhancer. I think Taylor Lewan had something similar. I believe he's also suing the doctor that gave it to him because the doctor told him there was nothing in it that was illegal. And I saw a report or an article where he was not the only player that deals with this doctor, so that could be something that we see down the line where this doctor may see some repercussions. I don't think Lewan is fighting the suspension because he knows he took a banned substance, just unfortunately he wasn't aware of it. All in all, for the Titans, it's not going to be a great year. I think offensively, I don't know how much they can keep up the Derrick Henry running. Early in the season, there were games where he was getting 18 to 20 carries, just like he was at the end of the season. But at the beginning of the season, it wasn't working. Some up and down play from Mariota. It's gonna lead to them going about 8-8. That's what I have. All right, now on to the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's really hard to believe that just 2 years ago, the Jaguars were playing in the AFC Championship game and had the Patriots on the ropes that second half. But things have changed. They made a move at quarterback. They bring in Nick Foles. They ship Blake Bortles out of town. They lose Dante Moncrief and TJ Yeldon on offense. They bring in Chris Conley at wide receiver. And they made a change at offensive coordinator. They bring in John DeFilippo. Now, John DeFilippo was the quarterback's coach in Philadelphia the year they won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles there. I get the connection there why they would make the hire. I also, last year, he was the offensive coordinator for the Vikings, and the Vikings fired him due to they wanted to run the ball more. DeFilippo is known for being heavily a heavily passing offense. And that's another thing I find interesting is Tom Coughlin, who's I think the president and the GM of the Jags, he really likes to play old school football. You run the ball, you play great defense. They bring in a passing offensive coordinator. I really don't think Nick Foles is going to be the difference maker here. There's a reason he's been a career backup. He's had a couple flash in the pan good seasons, a really good playoff run. I just feel like it's a bit of a stretch to think that Nick Foles was the missing link here. Another issue that they've had is Leonard Fournette, their running back, staying healthy and dealing with. He's had a suspension where he broke, I believe it was a team curfew. Tom Coughlin came out at the end of last year that he wasn't happy that I believe Fournette in the last game of the season was sitting on the bench and like laughing and smiling as they were losing. It just seems to be some conflict between Tom Coughlin and Leonard Fournette, and that could prevent him from being on the field at some point if he does break some more team rules. And they let TJ Yeldon go, which was really the only depth they had at running back. So if Leonard Fournette's out, they really lose their main running game. At wide receiver, they did bring in Chris Conley, who was coming over from the Chiefs. He has shown flashes. Just another one of those guys that has shown flashes of brilliance, but hasn't been able to put it together. And he also didn't really have the opportunity in Kansas City. With Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce really dominating things in Kansas City. They do have D.D. Westbrook, who is probably the best wide receiver on that team. I think he'll probably be Nick Foles' favorite weapon. He's a slot wide receiver. Nick Foles really likes to throw to the slot wide receiver. They also have Marquise Lee, who 2 years ago, and really going into last season, he was expected to be the number one wide receiver for that team. Unfortunately, he suffered an injury in the third preseason game last year. He's still recovering from that. It's uncertain whether or not he will be back week 1. Their defense, I expect their defense to be good. They took a bit of a step down last year. I think large in part was because their takeaways. They had way less takeaways last year than they did 2 years ago. I don't know. Jalen Ramsey is a great corner, but he seems to cause some distractions off the field, and that seem to kind of lead on the field as well. Unfortunately for the Jags, I don't see the season going very well. I don't think they've done enough with their offensive weapons. I love watching Nick Foles in that playoff run beat up on the old Patriots. I don't think he's the answer at quarterback, especially in a in a division that has some pretty good defenses. I have the Jags going 3-13. I don't see things going well for the coaching staff in Jacksonville, and I think they're going to regret the big money they put on Nick Foles.